Ghost are back with their 7th studio album, Skeletá.
This album is bringing the debut of the band's new frontman persona, Papa 5 Perpetua. And this is the new frontman that's going to be with the band going forward. You don't know how long for, but I always like it when they switch things up. This is 10 songs long, and it's just over 46 minutes in length. And we're going to jump straight into the first track with Peacefield. What did you think?
It was a kind of eerie start to the album with almost church choir vocals coming into it. I've got to admit, I've not really listened to a whole lot of Ghost up to this review, so I had no idea what to expect, but straight away, it kind of matched the image and what I've seen online.
Yeah, Ghost is a band that I've listened to a bit of before. I've not really delved into the discography, but I know quite a bit about them and the lore. They're a very lore-based band, and I think this album adds to it nicely. There's a very calm introduction, and like you're saying, there's some great vocal harmonies, and that carries out throughout the album. And when all the instruments kick in on this track, you can just feel the size of everything that's going on and how well put together everything is. So you know that this is going to be an album where a lot of thought has been put into the craft of every song.
Yeah, straight away you could tell it was fantastically produced. Did you say the vocals are good as they are throughout the album? And also it instantly gave kind of old school rock vibes, if that makes sense.
Mid 80s hard rock is where I would probably place it for that. And in this track, there's a killer guitar solo at around 3 minutes 30. Again, great guitar work throughout the album. And I really love the use of drums on this one in particular to create like tension and a little bit of suspense going on. But we move off that nicely into Lacrima. Lacrima? Not sure if I'm butchering that one.
Yeah, I don't want to read half of these song titles. They're quite difficult, aren't they? But again, this came in from the start with some kind of keys that sounded a little bit scary again. I don't know if this is always Ghost's vibe. I would assume, given they're called Ghost, that it is. But then the guitar kicks in nicely. They bring in the elements. And I must admit, the kind of stereotypical metal sounding guitar does work so well in this track and switches things up.
Yeah, definitely. There's a thumping bass throughout this that kind of carries things over, and there's a lot of key changes throughout, which kind of keeps a nice sense of, I want to say, dread, where it's like it's a major key and then all of a sudden it's a minor key, then it's back to major, so it kind of keeps you on your toes and you never know what's going to come next.
I picked up on kind of similar in vein to that. The vocals went from being quite dark and serious to more high-pitched and a little bit of a kind of nicer mood, if you will, in moments. I thought he did a fantastic job of that. But we'll go on to the next track, which is Satanized.
I adore the walking bass line from the get-go on this one, and it adds such a proper, it's like a funky effect being added to the track. And I can see this track definitely being a fan favourite. I can see this going absolutely crazy at live shows.
The drums were the standout part of this for me. And the drums, along with the instrumental, paired up with the vocals very well. Do you know when an artist is kind of, you can tell that they're very aware of the timing of the instrumental and they're matching their vocals with that, which I think obviously shows massive skill. But up to this point in the album, I thought that the song sounded quite similar.
Yeah, so I think these were the 3 singles that they put at the start of the album, which is quite a rarity these days. You don't really see singles being the first 3 tracks. So everything from this point onwards, nobody's actually heard prior to the album being released. But this one in particular had very catchy vocal melodies, great to sing along with, and like I say, I can see that being sung amazingly well live. But we move off that into Guiding Lights, which has very, very emotional vocals right off the bat.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, the first 3 tracks sounded a bit samey. I was happy that this switched up the vibes, a much calmer track. This kind of reminded me of Stone Sour in a strange way. You know, I guess that's just because it's a calmer kind of version of a similar sound. But really like this one, a good switch in pace. And again, yeah, every member of the band did well on this track.
Yeah, and something that really stood out to me on this track was that there's not really too much going on with the guitar. And I think that when you're doing a solo that is managed to be pulled back but still sounding great, I think that takes a lot of skill to be able to have such a simplistic guitar line that sounds amazing, but you're not going over the top and doing all the twiddly, all that shit. You don't need to do that. You can just carry it in itself, and I think they nail that perfectly with this track.
And the vocals are very good, as they have been on the other tracks, but this gives them a bit more time to shine, a bit more concentration on the vocals, and they are fantastic.
I do personally feel like this track could have even potentially been just an instrumental and I would have been happy. The vocals added a little cherry on top, but without them, I wouldn't have even been mad just hearing the instruments.
Go on, Tim. I'll let you try say this next track title.
Profundis Borealis. I want to say D or De Profundis Borealis. Or it's probably Profunde because it's Latin. But anyway, it's that one. And this translates to From the Northern Depths is what that means. And the intro piano is something that we've not heard so far on this album, so I quite liked that.
Yeah, this was more of a different track again, a completely different light to the last one. I thought it was going to be really chill again in the introduction, but then it kicked in a little bit. The reaching guitar notes were really nice. I felt like they were long lasting in comparison to some of the other tracks so far. And I actually thought the drumming again was a real standout on this track.
Yeah, I was not expecting the uplifting guitar licks that came in after the piano. There's a lot of juxtaposition on this track, which it contracts. The sounds are contrasting each other throughout the whole thing, and it keeps you on your toes. And they've done that for a few tracks so far, and I think it's really well done in a way that you never know what's coming next. So as you're listening, you don't get bored because some of these tracks are coming up to 5-6 minutes long. And at that point, some songs can feel like they drag on. But with the way that they phrased these tracks, it keeps you interested, it keeps you intrigued.
And he also changed up the vocal delivery on this one. There was a couple sections where it was almost more spoken word as opposed to the typical singing that we've had. So yeah, that was calm.
Yeah, this is a personal favourite of mine from the album, and the outro has some very, very haunting vocals on it. But we move off that nicely into Cenotaph. What did you think?
This was a lot more melodic than some of the other songs on the album, a little bit funkier, kind of a head bop for what I would say is the first time really where you feel like you can actually jam out to it and you're not kind of overindulging in all the different elements. And I like this song for that.
Yeah, it was proper upbeat, and there was some great guitar work throughout again. But there was a nice bit of synth work on this track, which I really liked. It felt kind of Van Halen-y, a bit Europe-y, very, very 80s coded. And from everything from the drums to the synth, it all felt like it fell into that realm.
Was that synth work towards the end of the track?
Yeah, it was like maybe the last minute or two.
I couldn't work out if it was a synth or like a really pitched guitar solo.
I do think that it was a synth with a guitar. I think it was the two overlaid to each other. But it's interesting that it's made you think that because it was done so well that you kind of go, what instrument is that? They've added something, but I don't know what it is. And again, they're really good at just keeping you intrigued because even though the tracks are quite long, you get towards the end and they've added an extra instrument that just adds an extra layer and it keeps you going.
And then we're here next with Missilia Amore.
Oh, you went for that one. That's all right. This is a much heavier guitar from the get-go, and this track feels almost like straight off a Steel Panther album, Def Leppard vibes. And if you listen to the lyrics, love rockets shot right in between your eyes. I wonder what this track could be about. I think it's open to interpretation, but I don't think there's many ways that you can interpret it.
For the track itself, the thing that I picked up on most was that one big repetitive snare hit.
The reverse reverb snare, which is a personal favourite effect of mine. I adore it when bands use that.
And that kind of stayed throughout the song, but then different elements came in and out, and there was some choppy sections and stuff, but I thought that the use of that reverb snare was really good.
Yeah, I really like that track, and I think it's just very nicely done. It's all wrapped up nice in a nice little package. Here's the track, boom,
and
done.
There was a really good guitar solo in there in one moment. I actually think that this would probably be my favourite track off the album.
Yeah, it's up there for me. But we move off onto Marks of the Evil One, which has potentially the most catchy vocal melody off the entire album. I can still hear the Deo, Deo. I can't stop hearing the vocals.
So I actually wasn't a huge fan of this one. From the introduction, I thought it was going to be really good. And then I thought it was fine. It wasn't a bad song, but especially for like the last minute, it was just the same lyrics repeated. I felt it didn't have as much content as some of the rest of the project does.
No, I think that's valid criticism of the track as a whole, but I think this is written in a way to be one that crowds will sing along to, with the that vocal line along with the I think it's a really, really well done track. It's very catchy, and Tobias is just fantastic at coming up with earworms. He's done it on nearly every track on this album. Very fun one to play some air guitar to, for sure.
I just read the next title and it's Umbra.
Yeah.
I thought it said Umbro at first in my notes. I was like, was it Umbro? But no, this was a switch in pace. It kind of sounded a bit more like a Midwestern American old rock song as opposed to the more metal theme that is of course present throughout the album. The chorus was cool, really matched the instrumental again. They've done that multiple times throughout this album where I've noticed that the lead singer has purposely matched the timing of his vocals with what's going on in the instrumental, and that is good. It's cool. I don't know if they've overdone it a little bit at this point, but it's not something I hear this often.
Yeah, exactly. So when you hear it being done, it's an interesting thing. And also it's refreshing at times as well. But this has a part where the guitar first kicks in, accompanied by the world's most classic cowbell, which just screams 80s hard rock and that kind of genre. And I adore the amount of effects and synths and the reversed reverb snare hits and everything that they've done on this track to kind of hark back to those 80s styles. And I think out of a lot of bands, I couldn't name another band that's doing this style of music these days.
And then they had a really higher tempo, kind of anxiety-inducing end to the song, which I think was definitely the best part of it, in my opinion.
And that goes on to the last track nicely with Excelsis. And this is straight in talking about the end of things. And I think as a final track on an album, that's really good because you're getting people ready. They know the ending's coming. But also, from things that I've seen online, this may be the end of their kind of image that they currently have where it's very lore focused. They might be moving away from that sometime soon. Not quite sure, but Tobias has done a few interviews where he's hinting towards that. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. But this track in general was a clear last track, a clear one and done, and I think it served its purpose.
I think it served its purpose, but that's about as far as I'd go with it. I think it was one of the longest tracks on the album at 6 minutes, and it didn't feel as inspired as the rest of the songs. It was fine to end the album, but you could tell that they were tapering it down massively. So out of all the songs, again, this was probably one of the lesser ones, in my opinion.
I thought the lyrics were definitely something to contemplate over. I feel like he brought a lot of good lyrics in this one. It was a lot more emotional and a bit more heartfelt than perhaps previous tracks. And there was some more amazing harmonic guitars where you've got two guitars doing different lines on the solos. Really enjoy that kind of stuff. And I just thought it was a lovely ending to the album.
Well, Tim, speaking of the album, give me some thoughts as a whole. What did you think of it?
I thought it was an all-round solid album. It stayed on theme. Every track was all within the same realm. We got that kind of strong 80s rock music influence throughout. None of the tracks really strayed from that, which, again, some people may say is to its deficit. I think it's to its positive because there isn't enough artists that are harking back to those kind of sounds and including them in the music and doing whole projects where it feels like if you'd have told me this was released in 1987, I would completely agree, other than the fantastic production, because I don't think they had production like this in the 80s.
Yeah, having not listened to much Ghost in the past, as I referenced at the start of this video, I had no idea what to expect coming into this. As you say, the production was fantastic. There was some great guitar work and guitar solos, a couple songs where the drums shone through, the vocals were good. But despite all of that, I would kind of say the same as you. I think it was a solid album, but I don't think it took many risks, which is fine. And Ghost fans, obviously that's not me, I'm sure will find a lot to appreciate about this album. And there is good moments, and I can see how if they're one of your favourite bands, they've produced something that you're definitely going to enjoy. But for me, it was just missing that little bit of edge in moments, that little test or that little difference in sound. It never quite hit that.
Let's move on to one of the most important things, though, and that is the rating out of 10. What would you give this album?
I've given it a 6.5 out of 10. And I think if I was a real fan of metal, that could probably quite easily go up a little bit. But as someone that's not in the genre as much, as I say, really enjoyed the vocals and certain moments and elements of songs, but I just thought it was a little bit too safe.
So I've gone with a solid 7 and potentially a soft 7.5, depending on my future listens, because even on my second listen, I got through it and I kind of thought, you know what, I actually like some of these songs more on the second time through than I did the first. With all the catchy melodies throughout, I feel like those future listens will be very important in getting this up the rankings.
Well, the fact that future listens are in mind means that you must have enjoyed it to a certain extent, Tim. And if you've enjoyed this video, please do remember to hit like and subscribe. We review a hell of a lot of new albums coming out, whether it be metal, pop punk, rap, everything you can think of.
Thank you very much for watching.